Hey guys, today's video we're talking about something that lots of people like to debate about, spray foam insulation. Now we are doing the rim joist on this project in spray foam, and we are using batt insulation here in our wall cavities. We're going to talk about the four probably most common types of insulation and the two or three that we typically use the most at the Building Collective. Today's video all about insulation. Here we go. The four most common types of insulation in America are probably going to be batt insulation. And that's going to be our commodity grade, the fiberglass insulation that you're going to see going in spec homes across America. A lot of builders will jump up into like a rock wool or a safe and sound for different applications, or wanting a better product, or they're going to put it on the exterior of a home maybe, and you just don't want to do that with fiberglass. There's a ton of batt insulation products, and depending on your area, you're going to have accessibility to different ones. Here in our climate and in the South Dakota area, we have quite a few different batt insulation products we can get our hands on, so that's usually not a problem. Another common insulation type is going to be a blown in, and that is going to be a lot of times done above the ceiling drywall in the attic. It can also go behind a mesh in the wall cavity. A lot of people like to go with that kind of as a medium grade between not necessarily a batt and having maybe the chances of the risks for the installation errors, and they don't sometimes want to go all the way over to a spray foam. It's going to be on the high end for cost, so they can run that fabric down the wall, blow in the cavities, and you know you have a very dense packed wall cavity that way. Another common one is going to be rigid foam board. Now this is going to be typically used in different areas than the fiberglass and the blown in, or the batt and the blown in are going to be put in. Usually a rigid board is going to be going maybe against the foundation walls on the exterior, might be going in the rim joists actually if they want to go that route rather than spray foam. It might go on the exterior of the home if we're doing outer insulation rather than inner insulation. It might go on the roof deck. So there's a lot of different applications, and there's a lot of different polyiso products for that rigid foam, and it's a whole nother world. I mean, each one of these different types of insulation we could get into a whole video about in and of themselves. And then I would say the fourth most common one in America is going to be the spray foam insulation. It is becoming more and more popular with the advancements of the chemical design of the compounds that are creating the spray foam. It's become more environmental friendly, and it has code is evolving in such a way that the benefits of spray foam are allowing builders a easier route of getting to the code airtightness to meet occupancy. So there's definitely some benefits to that side of it. When we have a client come to us and they have a budget where we're definitely having to trim and shave maybe some things that they like or want in the home, and we get to this conversation of insulation. What do we do for insulation? Is this something that we want to cut on as a builder? Is this something we want to cut on for our client? And that's a big question, and there's a lot of answers to it. Now, at the Building Collective, our top priority is going to be the air sealing and water sealing. So if we can control air and water from getting from the exterior of the house to the interior, if our outer envelope is completely sealed and we know we can control those two things, then we have a lot more leeway on what we can do with the insulation and being budget friendly in that way. Now, what do you mean by that? Well, if we know we don't have air movement in the house and we know we don't have water coming in, obviously. That's a really big thing we try to focus on. The insulation is important, but it's not maybe as important as a lot of people put emphasis on. Yeah, some people get all nerdy about having R64 in the attic, or I've got R26 walls instead of R23 walls. And well, great. It is better, obviously, if we can get more insulation in our cavities and our roof deck and under our floor, but it's also not the end of the world if we don't have the airflow and we don't have to worry about water getting to that insulation. So here's what we typically recommend when we're on a project where we know we are having to be a little bit more budget friendly on some of these things. We might do, if we are going with a Huber product on the exterior structural sheathing, we know we have our water and our air barrier there. If we're not going to upgrade to maybe a Zip R and have the continuous insulation around the outside, we might just go ahead and spray foam or do a process what they would call a flash and bat. So you would spray foam 1.5 inches right along the sheathing, and you'd come back over that with a fiberglass bat insulation. So you're going to get a high quality R value right up against that sheathing, and then you're going to come back over it with a lower cost product to fill that cavity with the, say, 4 inches that are left. And you can still get a R19 in that. So we might get 1.5 inches of spray foam, which is going to be an R10, and another R19 in there. We'll be looking at an R29. So we can have a really good insulated wall cavity with that. Now if we want to jump up more to like a middle grade, we recommend putting like a Zip R on the outside and having a 1/2 inch continuous insulation around, eliminate the thermal bridging on our studs, and then going ahead and doing 3 inches of closed cell spray foam in our stud cavity or our wall cavities. That's going to give us an R6 on the exterior, and come back over it with another R21 plus. So we're going to be looking at that R27, R30, depending on how much of that spray foam we get in that cavity. So the biggest part about that, though, is eliminating the thermal bridging of having that structural sheathing right up against the stud cavity, just like we have here. And then if we want to go to a top-of-the-line grade system, we are going to move the insulation to the outside of the home. And the reason for that is that we get the thermal layer on the outside, and the whole home is being insulated then. So all the components, the structural components of the home, are receiving that continuous temperature and environment, not just the drywall in. So it's kind of like going outside in the winter. We put a big jacket on the outside of us, not inside our skin, but outside of the skin around our body. We want our whole body to be warmed. It's also beneficial to have the whole structural components of the house to be inside that thermal envelope. Now let's talk about spray foam, because lots of people like to debate about it, whether or not it's good or bad, whether or not we should be using it as a product. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things people like to get caught up on. Now let's just start with, is it good or bad? Well, I don't think that's the right question we should be asking, whether or not it's just good or bad. I think the right question to be asking is, where should we use spray foam? Because like all of the different insulation types, like the 4 I gave earlier, they're all good products in a different area and for different applications and different uses. So I think at the end of the day, it comes down to where are we using it, why are we using it, and what kind of value are we getting out of its location and where it's installed. Now, Batt insulation is the cheaper end of the insulation products. The bad thing about batt insulation is it's the cheaper end of the insulation products. And so you're going to have the lowest grade of labor installing it. It's going to be getting thrown in at the quickest rate. There's going to be a lot less concern for how it's installed. And the one thing about batt insulation is it gives you that R value in the perfect laboratory environment that it's tested in, where it's tight against every single wall and the top and the bottom of the cube, or however it's tested. So in looking at, say, putting it in a wall cavity, if somebody is just slamming it in, they're not getting it nice and just tight up against each stud and cutting real nicely around the outlets. Every single one of those points is a place where if there is airflow, there's a lot of airflow capability to get into those areas. That's why some houses, especially like older ones, built anywhere from the 1950s to, well, even present day, really. There's some poorly built houses out there. You might feel air coming through an outlet. That would be why. There's air coming through the exterior envelope, and it's finding a path right through that insulation. And the insulation, to some extent, is functioning as a filter. So you're filtering some of your inside air with a fiberglass insulation. That's just not something we want in our home. Yeah. So the big risk with it is the quality of the installation. Now, if you look at more of the blown-in products, those have a lot higher chance of getting a good quality installation because that fabric is getting stapled to the studs, and then that product is getting blown into every corner, nook, and crevice, and so it is pretty tight. The one bad thing that can typically happen over time is at the top plate, it can settle a little bit over time, and so you might end up with a little gap along your entire top plate where there's no insulation because it's just settled down, and so you're going to get a hot or cold spot there depending on the time of the year. With the rigid foam, it needs to get cut. If it's going to go in, say, the rim joist or exterior, I mean, there still needs to be some precision in the cuts. Along the foundation, there's probably some leeway there. At the end of the day, we want to have good quality installs, get joints tight, and then joints where there are a gap with the rigid board should be spray foamed with, say, a can of foam or something to fill that gap and give it a little bit more of an insulation value than just having an empty pocket, and also making a continuous path from one insulation board to the next. When we move on to spray foam is the only product that is two chemical components. They show up to the job site, get mixed together, and the product is created right there on site. Everything else gets shipped in and installed, whether it's cut down or modified. Spray foam is created. The chemical process happens right here on site, right when it's getting sprayed. So from the time that it comes out of that gun, it is fully developed, cured, and set within 2 minutes typically. It's a very fast process, but it also does have a chance for error. Now, the spray foam that we spray into our buildings is coming out of a machine that does a perfect 1-to-1 ratio, so the chance of human error is greatly diminished, so we don't have to worry about that, which is great. There are still some things that we do have to worry about. There's only certain thicknesses we can spray it at a time, so the installer needs to make sure they're careful and not overspraying the amount, because then the chemical process gets changed. There's too much heat. The reaction doesn't happen at the right rate. Another thing to keep in mind with the spray foam is the installer does have to prep. Like here, we have a lot of windows in this building. They all had to get covered because the chance of there being overspray onto those windows is actually fairly decent, especially if we were to do the wall cavities and not just the rim joists. But we go ahead and cover things that we don't want sprayed because there is overspray. It's not like bat or the blown in or the rigid foam where it's going to get cut or just cleaned off. If it gets sprayed on something, it's very hard to get off and sometimes impossible to get off. So you want to be really careful with that. Now there are some debates you could get in on the general health of spray foam and whether or not we should be spraying it in our buildings. Now there are a lot of data and facts that can back up reasons to actually use it and spray it. So that's another video. We can make it another time. I'm not going to touch on it today, but you may see some other videos out there from other people saying that spray foam is actually bad or shouldn't be sprayed. Well, you just need to make sure you have an installer that knows what they're doing, and you need to make sure you're installing it at the right rate and in the right places, and then you're fine. Now with insulation, there's lots of options, and they're all good options in certain scenarios and for certain clients. So if you can, get away from thinking, oh, one is bad, one is good, or we should always use one, but we should never use this one. Because in reality, they all have their place. And there is a good place to use each one of them depending on the scenario, depending on the client, depending on the project, and depending on the location. On this project, we use spray foam because it's the best product for this rim joist area, especially with all of the mechanicals that we had in place, and it was just going to be tricky to get to some areas. It'd be a lot quicker just to spray foam it and do bats down the wall cavity. Other projects, another insulation is going to be better. On your project, a different insulation might be better. That's all we're going to cover in this video for the most common types of insulation and the common things to keep aware of when using them or when thinking about using them in your next project. Make sure you follow along, subscribe to the channel so you get some notifications when we're going to post more videos. And if you have a project coming up and want to talk to me more about it, maybe talk about what kind of insulation you should put in it, or maybe talk about being a general contractor for your build here in the Rapid City or Black Hills area of South Dakota, send me a message, reach out to me. I'd love to talk with you more about that. And we will catch you on the next video with the next topic. See you guys.